Now, last night in the Aviva Stadium, the Netherlands beat the Republic of Ireland 2-1. On last Thursday night in Paris, France, probably the best team in the world, certainly a team that's been in the last two World Cup finals, winning the 2018 final and losing on penalties to Argentina last year. We lost 2-0. Netherlands, full of really top-class players, Virgil van Dijk, many of them, De Jong, who plays for Barcelona, and Ake, who plays for Manchester City, very, very good player. And we have a team largely made up of journeymen, and we gave the job to Stephen Kenny 3 years ago to coach this team, and he has had a very hard time. It's a pleasure now to welcome John Giles to the stand. John, quite apart from all his media work in RTE and for us, and indeed for News Talk, is widely regarded as one of the finest brains there's been in soccer in these islands, not just in Ireland, but in Britain when he was a player. One of the great thinkers about the game, as well as being one of our greatest players, and indeed one of the greatest players that ever played the game anywhere. And his love of the game is deep, and people respect him for it. He's not a controversialist, which some of us have to be to get a living, but he thinks deeply, and he's always worth listening to. John, thank you very much for joining us today. I know,
no bother, Eamon.
I know you watched the two games that we've just experienced, as indeed you've watched the 3 years unfold of Stephen Kenny's tenure as coach of the Irish team. There are many people now, including the experts on RTE, calling for his head, and the media, of course, the print media, also singing that song. The question I want to ask you is this. When Stephen took the job on, he followed Martin O'Neill and Trapattoni, and he decided he wasn't going to go down the route that Trapattoni and O'Neill went down, which was the long ball route, up and under, throw bodies at it, and you were going nowhere. Stephen decided we had to play the game, and he expressed this, had to play the game the way it's meant to be played, a passing game, movement, and with a premium on technical ability. Now, the question is, John, first of all, did he make the right choice 3 years ago in going down that road, or did Martin O'Neill and Trapattoni make the right choice when they said, we don't have players good enough to play, we're going to go the long ball route?
Well, it's very contradictory, Eamon, in terms of, I think Trapattoni qualified for the major competition.
He did, yeah. The Euros in Poland.
I think Martin O'Neill did as well.
Yes.
Yeah. So it is a results game, and I know exactly how you're coming to. I didn't like the way either of them played as managers. I would be in your school that you get the ball down and play. If you can do it, but you have to get results with it.
Yeah.
Now, I think, Stephen, and I think, to be fair, that the two managers you mentioned before actually had a better squad of players than the squad of players that's been available to Stephen since he took over.
They were so good, those squads of players, that didn't have to pick Wes Hoolahan.
Oh, at the time. Yeah,
well I mean, they could actually leave Wes Hoolahan out.
Yeah, but Eamon, that's what the way they wanted to do it. And they did qualify for competitions.
And what happened then after? Okay, let me ask you what happened. Yeah. They qualified for competitions. What happened next? They didn't qualify for competitions because they were in a dead end, I would argue.
Well, they could only qualify for one competition at a time, I mean. That's what they said. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't in favour of everything those managers did. And Wes Hoolahan, I was like yourself at the time. I wanted him in the team. But that was their choice. That's what they wanted to do. Now, in Stephen's case, I think Stephen has done a really, really good job with the players that's been available to him.
Yes.
I think he has. I think he has lesser players. I don't be having to go at these present day players than the two managers you mentioned before.
Yes. And younger players, John. You've put a lot of young players in. Yes.
Yeah, no, they're the players that's available to him. I think he's been brave in what he's done, and I'd love to see him qualify for a competition. I think they they try to play constructive football, and most of the time they do. But he doesn't have a lot of choice at the moment, Damon.
Yeah.
He doesn't have a lot of choice at the moment. I mean, if we go back to the players that Martin O'Neill had available for him, and the Italian manager had played, and he had them playing the way he wanted the team to play, I think they would be more successful than the managers we mentioned.
Yes.
But he doesn't have those players available to him. I mean, he only has to make the most of what he's got. But if you go back, if you go back to Jack Charlton's time, you and I weren't in favour of the way Jack Charlton played the game. But he had brilliant players at his disposal, and he's been a hero. He was very, very successful.
Yes,
and in what he did.
But he qualified for three. He qualified for 3 major tournaments, 2 World Cups, and Euros in 1988. And the thing about Jack was, as you just pointed out, John, what players he had to pick. They were so good that he could get rid of Liam.
Yeah.
In a very rough way, actually. But he did make that progress. But, when you look at last night...
We qualified for the first time, Eamon. We'd never qualified before.
Yeah. Yeah.
As you know, because we were doing it on the telly at the time, and I was at Pala Jackson played with him for years and years, and I didn't like the way the Irish team played at all.
Yeah.
But the crowd liked it. They were able to go on their thousands to major cup finals, and that's what they wanted. But I think if Stephen had the players that Jack had at his disposal, he certainly wouldn't be leaving Liam Brady out of a team, and he'd have the players to do it. Yeah. And it's the fact is, I think he's done a good job with what he has at his disposal. But as you know, people get impatient if you're not qualifying for major competitions. But I think a lot of the crowd are behind him. The place was packed over the weekend.
Yeah, it was packed. It was 49,807 people at the match last night. They love the young lads. They love the idea of the young lads. I think they have respect for Stephen for trying. They know what he inherited, which was very, very, very little. I sometimes laughed at about the teams I played in, and but we had much better players, John, than even around me, and not including me, around me. Back in the day, John, Jesus, the players we had. Tony Dunn, Noel Cantwell, Charlie Hurley, amazing players. And now we're at rock bottom. And what I put it to you is, it doesn't appear that there'll be any way to save Stephen, and maybe he shouldn't be saved. Maybe. But we need people like Stephen in our football, working with our players, even if it was under 21 level or whatever level. We can't afford to cast someone with his, he's found players. Like he's found that young lad Collins, who's he's playing for Brentford now. He got a move from Wolves. He lost the head a little bit when he got found. He's a really good player, John. He's a top-class defender, in my opinion. Okay? This lad Adamida, the front player, I think he'll be a very, very good player. Benny, who's playing for Luton Town now, he's playing for Rotherham last year. I think he's a bit of a lad. He has his own opinions and that, but he's in the team. Now, there are other players who aren't quite so good. That's a problem. But he's blooded players, hasn't he?
I think he's done a good job of what he has at his disposal, there's no doubt about that. And we don't have the players. We just don't have the players that we used to have over different periods. And I think he has done a good job. It depends now whether the people above have patience with him and continues to give him a contract in the way that he's playing. And maybe some other players will come to the fore.
Yeah. Let me remind you of the media. And when you were a young man, not a young man, you were 30s, you were finishing up as a player in your early 30s, You weren't liked by the media here. And, when you first took over the team as player manager first, but then as coach, you got a rough ride, didn't you?
Well, I didn't get a rough ride early on, Eamon. I think the press are in a game totally different to football in many, many ways. And I was in the job for 7 years, 8 years, and I think I'd finished playing at that stage. And I wasn't a media man, like, as you know, you can play the game with the media. And I didn't, if I had my time all over again, I would have done it a little bit better. Because when I was asked by the media certain questions, my attitude was with the players, I will never criticize you publicly.
Yes.
If I have something to say, I'll say it in the dressing room. But that was totally against what the press wanted. They wanted a story.
Yeah.
I didn't give them a story. I should have given them a little bit more. And I got a reputation from the press.
I remember telling you that.
But I wasn't interested in it.
I know that. I know
but
that.
They said, and it became, I was cautious. And as if I was cautious on the field, which was a load of rubbish.
Yeah.
But I was cautious with them because I felt with the players. I said to the players, anything is said in the dressing room stays in the dressing room. If I have anything to say to you, I'll say it to you, but I'll never say it to you publicly.
Yes.
And of course, the press used to say to me quite rightly one time, well, John, you didn't do well. You didn't play well in the midfield today.
Yeah.
Sometimes they were right. And I'd say, well, no. Because I didn't want to upset Liam Brady and Mick Martin because that was in the... If I had said yes,
yeah.
Mick and Liam could say, John, I thought we were supposed to keep everything to ourselves.
Yeah.
So I got the name of being very, very cautious with the team, with the way the team played.
Yeah.
Yes,
that was a different thing altogether.
The press didn't like them because I wasn't giving them any stories.
Yeah.
That's the way it was. If I knew what I knew now, I might have given them a couple of stories.
Now, this heat,
I'm not so sure.
This heat that Stephen is feeling, and some of it is disgusting because it's personal, and there's a whiff of filth off it. It really is that bad, John.
Well, I'd be totally against that, Eamon, as you know.
I know you
think
are.
that's totally. I think it's totally wrong. I think.
But you've been the subject of that, John, haven't you? And you were a much tougher and more experienced man going into that job and coming home here than Stephen ever was. But it hurts, doesn't it?
Well, of course it hurts. I mean,
Yeah.
the point about it is, and I can only go on my own individual time.
Yes.
I mean, like I never qualified. With
but it was much harder to qualify in those days. It has to be said. You had to win the group.
Yeah, but before I played as player manager. I was playing for Leeds at the time. But I know for a fact, I think in 30 matches before I took over, we won 5.
Yeah, that's about the same as Stevens.
We were down. I mean, they must have been down and out because I was a player manager. They were desperate for a manager, but we did reasonably well.
Yeah,
but we didn't qualify.
Yeah.
But we came very near to qualifying, whereas previously we never looked like qualifying at all. Well, that was my story with the press, and they did turn on me in as you know, in personal ways.
Yes.
So I had to put up with that, and it's not pleasant.
Yeah.
So I feel great sympathy for Stephen. I don't see the papers in Ireland now. But as you say, they're having a go at him, and it gets very personal, and that's totally wrong.
Now let me ask you. When I didn't mention Evan Ferguson, I mean to cap it all off, we find this wonderful teenager. He's 18 years of age. He's refused to go near the England setup, although they've tapped him up. And he said he's an Irishman, he's going to play for Ireland. He gets a hat-trick for Brighton last week, and he gets injured before Stephen can call him up. Then Seamus Coleman. Seamus is worth 2 players, especially when you're under the cosh, like we were in Paris, and indeed like we were at times last night. And Seamus has been injured really on and off I don't think he's been fit for a year or more. So that kind of, you can be cursed with bad luck, can't you, John?
Of course.
I mean, people say luck evens itself out and all of that. It doesn't.
No, that doesn't. It doesn't happen. I mean,
no.
And like, losing two players like that is awful because he doesn't have a big squad of players anyway.
No.
I think Stephen has been very unlucky to be in the job that he's in, Eamon. And I don't want to be too disrespectful to the players at his disposal, but they haven't been the best squad of players since for a long time. I mean, if you go back to Jack's time in particular, we had unbelievable players. Eamon, playing in the Premiership, playing with winning teams, playing for Liverpool, playing with Manchester United, and that. I mean, Stephen doesn't have that, and he can only make the best with what he has. And I think he's making the best with what he has now.
Now, this raises a question. Also, like COVID, playing in empty stadiums. Now, this is all hurled at Stephen and anyone who supports him. We've heard enough about COVID. We've heard enough about the injuries. But the injuries are real. And as far as the World Health Organization is concerned, COVID was real. And it's not funny playing in the Aviva in an empty stadium, is it, John?
No.
When you've got a lot of young lads in the team. And I'm just thinking, naming some of them, like Ogbenny, who I think is a terrific young player. And Collins, who I think is a terrific young player. As I say, I thought he lost a head a bit there for a while, and Wolves let him go. But he's at Brentford now, and he won't be able to lose the head with that coach, who's a serious gent. There's a young fella called Knight, who's playing for Bristol City. Very, very good player, I think, as well. The question now is, Sean, how do we stay on this track? And what happens to Stephen?
Well, the only thing they can do is appreciate what he's done, Eamon.
Yeah.
And give him an extension to his contract.
Right.
Now, the public opinion come into this, Eamon.
Well, public opinion is behind him, John, I think.
Well,
there was 50,000 people. They were cheered off the pitch after the game to France, but they were brilliant. They played, a team to be in the World Cup final, and they were the crowd. It was a standing ovation for 50,000 people.
Yeah. Well, the crowd will dictate, obviously, how the situation arises. If the crowd stay on his side, Eamon, and then you've got to get the papers on his side.
Yeah.
And it'll be public opinion if and when it comes to that particular way.
Yeah.
But as you know, mostly it all depends on results, Eamon. We talked about a couple of the managers that we didn't like playing. I watched the team playing that, who got the results, and the papers were behind him and everything that goes with it. Stephen, I think, has been in a situation which has been one of the worst situations that any of the managers have taken over with the players that at his disposal.
Yeah.
Now, I think he's doing a good job with them, and there's nothing like winning matches, Eamon, as you know, for him to get an extension on the contract. But I do think, as you say, if the people are still coming to the matches, that's a big plus for them. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
It means that they like watching the team, and that will, whoever makes the decisions to extend his contract, will be a plus for him in a big way. On a personal note, I'd love to see him have an extension to his contract.
Right.
I think he's done a good job. I think he's a good fella. He's a good character, and I think he's made progress with the team, with the players that he's had at his disposal. It's a very, very difficult job.
And the bad luck we reference is real. Would you agree?
Which the virus
when you talk
situation,
about bad luck, I mean, Ferguson getting injured. I mean, you couldn't make it up. Seamus Coleman out for a year virtually, and other players being injured.
Yeah. He can't afford to have his best players injured, Eamon.
No.
He just can't. And as you know in football, good players can be injured at any time, the same as bad players can be injured at any time. It's a luck of the draw in that particular way. And hopefully, as you say, young Ferguson and Coleman and very, very, very good players. Unfortunately, that's the game, Eamon. You can do nothing about that. It's just unfortunate.
Now, there's 3 games to go in the group. The next game is on October the 13th. It's Greece at home. And a loss in Greece, he's taken unmerciful stick for. Although on the night Greece looked decent, and we didn't. We were again injury hit. Gibraltar away, which should be okay. Although the last time we were there, we played in a hurricane and we won 1-0. And then they have the Netherlands away on November the 18th, when the Netherlands will probably be tussling. Well, they won't even be tussling with France because France is 6 points clear of everybody. But the Netherlands will still have an interest. The question then is, where do we go? You can say we should, if we play as well as we played against France at home, and at times last night, we should beat Greece at home, perhaps, Gibraltar away, and probably the Netherlands away is a tough proposition. The problem he has, John, is he's all the young players. I mean, Shane Dunphy last night was brilliant, John. He's got a heart of a lion. He's a terrific man, a terrific pro, and you couldn't say enough good things about him. He's so honest. You know, he's at Norwich now. He got bombed out of Brighton because he couldn't play with the ball at his feet in his own box. Oh dear. But they have good lads. I mean, Egan's a very good lad. He's playing Sheffield United now, but he is a good player. And the midfield is a problem, isn't it, John? Cullen.
Man, it's always a problem. And the thing with Stephen now, for him to keep his job, I mean, he has to beat the teams that we should be beating.
Yes. I got you.
He has to do that.
Yeah, that's it's important to make that point. Teams you should be beaten, which don't include France and the Netherlands, correct?
No, we don't.
We've just lost to.
Yeah, I don't. They're the top team. I mean, France might be the best team in the world.
I think
certainly one of the best teams in the world.
Yeah.
And Holland have. We look at the players that Holland have at their disposal. I mean, we're nowhere near that.
No.
So I think if we do beat them or draw with those type of teams, that's a real bonus.
Yeah.
But I think when we get to some of the teams that you mentioned now, you have to do that. In Stephen's case, he has to do that.
Yeah, Greece, Gibraltar, obviously, and Greece come into that category, and there are many others who do. So that's the bar for you, the minimum, that you beat the teams you should be beaten.
Yes.
Yeah. And then the thing is that an awful lot of young players have come into the squad who are, promising, shall we say.
Yeah.
Some of them are, you bet your house on. Ferguson, obviously, is going to be a top player. And I think this young lad, Collins, the central defender, is a very, very good player. He scored that great goal at Lansdowne, but he's a very good defender as well. He's a game lad as well. I like the goalkeeper.
Yeah, I like him. I mean, he had a bad time at Wolves. Wolves were having a bad time themselves, and they got rid of him. But he's only a young fella, as you say. And,
I think he lost the run of himself. He scored a great goal in the Aviva, and then I watched him in a few league matches afterwards playing for Wolves. I think maybe that, sometimes had an effect on him. But he's gone to Brentford now, and this coach at Brentford, this Danish coach, doesn't stand for Thomas Frank is his name. He doesn't stand for any nonsense.
No, he's young enough to come back, Eamon. He's young enough to come back now
and get the good habits back into his game.
Exactly.
But the bigger problem, to just put this to you, we don't seem to be producing young players in any numbers the way we used to. I mean, even after our time, say when Liam, Frank Stapleton, David O'Leary, Wes Houlihan even, Roy Keane. So there's something wrong with the game, with the structure of the game here, that is preventing us. Now, Stephen Kenny has tapped into a vein of good players. We're doing really well at under 21 level, at underage level. And I think it's that getting those players through so they fulfill their promise. There's a job there. I'm not saying disagreeing with you. I think Stephen should be allowed to finish his contract. But there is a job there, and there are good people working there. But we've no FAI, John. They say the FAI should do something, but the chief executive lives in London. Do you ever get down that way, London?
Do I?
Yeah.
No, very
you might see him.
London.
You might ask him, what's the story with Stephen? But anyway.
Yeah, but it's schoolboys, Eamon, from our time, well, my time and before you, the clubs, the clubs, schoolboy clubs produced the players themselves.
They did, yeah.
I don't know. Nobody knows. I mean, are the kids not as interested as they were? Are they taken away from it? I don't know.
Well, it's easy to work out, John. They don't play on the streets anymore. You don't have the improvised games in streets and parks.
Yeah.
And kids have their iPhones. They have their computer games. And they don't have to play real football. They can play imaginary football up in their bedroom.
Yeah.
And that's but that's a phenomenon that's worldwide.
Yeah.
And other nations are producing players. Now, the thing is, other nations are producing players because they have academies and they've recognised, they've done an analysis of the curses of modern times in terms of sports. This is why the kids aren't. And so you build a facility and you attract the kids and you tailor it to modern times. So you have an academy and it's different, but you still get the same vibe that we used to get playing on the street or in the local park. And I mean, you have told us many times how you were, in Ormond Square, you were kicking a ball against the wall, and you actually were, weren't you? With your right foot and your left foot. I was doing the same, but it didn't work. The ball didn't come back from the wall, so let me get away. But the thing is, these are social things that can be dealt with. There's an answer to them, but we're not finding the answers in Ireland.
No. Obviously, from our time, I mean, I know I came from Ormond Square, which was a working class area. As a kid, there was nothing to keep you in the house.
That's right.
There was no television in those days.
Right.
You had to. In other words, your man say, "Out you go and play," and all my pals were the same.
And I was the same as well. Yeah, there was nothing.
And you did the same. Yeah.
Your man wanted you out.
I see the grandkids now. That's not happening now with the kids.
No.
In a big way.
It's funny, but the thing is, but say England are producing some good young players now. France have
as many as they used to, Eamon.
France have a wonderful place called Clairefontaine, which there's a Clairefontaine, which is the most beautiful race course in the world. But this isn't. It's a training and coaching facility. You live there, and if you're showing promise as a young boy, 12, 13, younger even, that you go there and you're educated in football and you're educated in education. But this is the question. We are not having any conversation here about this. Where are we nurturing our talent? Where will we find our talent? No one's asked you, have they? No. John Giles, celebrated as the most intelligent player of his generation and any other generation in England, not asked, right? I don't think anyone was asked Liam. Liam was the head of the academy at Arsenal for years, produced players in Eddie and Ketia, one of the new young players in the team now, striker. Liam was one of Liam's and many other of the best young Arsenal players. No one's asked Liam, have they? So is anyone in Ireland, do you know, thinking about these questions? Never mind doing anything about them.
Not that I know of. No, I'm not in touch. I'm not in touch with anybody that's doing whatever they are doing in.
They're doing nothing as far as I can see, except the likes of Stephen Kenny, who is thinking about the game, who has worked at the game at League of Ireland level, at underage level. He's working on it. But then he steps into this job, and because there is a lack, there's no production line producing enough talented young players, he's dead. And now he's getting slaughtered. And you never see the name of the people in the FAI who are responsible for providing the facilities that we badly need. Does that surprise you?
It does. It is, because I don't know what's going on there, Eamon. But I would have thought that there should be some sort of a youth football, schoolboy football. I've lost touch with it, I must say. But I would imagine that's the way it should be.
If you were asked, would you contribute?
I would do it in a small way, Eamon. I'd be honest, I'd be getting too old for it.
Yeah.
But I would make a contribution as best I could, but I wouldn't be able to get out there and do what I could do years ago. I wouldn't be able to do it.
No, but you were never asked 10 years ago. Were you ever asked?
No.
Right. That says it all. Okay, John, we're grateful to you for joining us as always. And thank you very much. I know you don't like talking about yourself, unlike some of us. We're very grateful to John Giles, one of our greatest players, and one of our greatest thinkers. And you've heard what he's got to say. And that is more or less what many of the professionals and many of the people in the game who are professionals, who admire John, not just as a player, but as a brain, would be saying as well. But they don't have the possibility of saying it because the lads who run the media show keep them away from microphones and never ask them questions. That's all we have time for today. We wish Stephen Kenny well. I'd like to endorse what John's just said. Thanks for listening.